Why some people quietly pull ahead. At the beginning, most people look the same. They start in similar places. They have similar goals. They even put in similar effort. From the outside, there is no obvious difference. But give it a few years, and the gap becomes impossible to ignore. Some people quietly pull ahead, not dramatically at first, not in a way that grabs attention, but slowly, steadily, almost invisibly, their lives begin to move in a different direction. This creates one of the most confusing experiences to watch from the outside, because it rarely looks like luck, and it rarely looks like talent alone. Instead, it looks quiet, predictable, almost boring. Most people misunderstand this phase completely. They assume progress should feel obvious. They assume growth should be fast. They assume success should announce itself early. But real separation rarely works that way. In the beginning, progress hides. Two people can make very different decisions every day and still look identical for a long time. This is where most people lose patience, because the early phase of progress is emotionally unrewarding. You put in effort, you build routines, you make better decisions, and externally, almost nothing changes. This is the danger zone, not because progress isn't happening, but because it doesn't feel like it's happening. Human psychology struggles with delayed rewards. We are wired to respond to immediate feedback. When effort produces quick results, motivation feels easy. But when effort produces slow, quiet change, the brain starts to question the process. This is where many people unknowingly step off the path. They don't quit loudly. They don't make a big announcement. They simply drift back toward what feels familiar, and the quiet separation begins. The people who pull ahead are not always working harder. They are often just staying consistent longer. Consistency does something powerful over time. It compounds. But compounding is difficult to notice in real time. At first, it looks flat, almost pointless. This is why early progress is so deceptive. For weeks, sometimes months, disciplined behavior produces results that are barely visible. Savings accounts grow slowly, skills improve gradually, habits stabilize quietly. Nothing about this phase feels dramatic. But underneath the surface, something important is happening. Momentum is building. Momentum rarely announces itself. It builds quietly through repetition. Each small action reinforces the next one. Each consistent day reduces friction for the following day. Over time, the effort required to stay consistent actually decreases. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of long-term progress. People assume consistency always feels hard, but properly structured consistency becomes easier over time. The routine becomes familiar. The decisions become automatic. The resistance fades. Meanwhile, the people who rely on bursts of motivation experience the opposite pattern. They start strong. They push intensely. They rely on emotion to carry them forward. But intensity without structure burns out quickly. When motivation dips, the entire system collapses. This creates the illusion that some people are simply more disciplined. But discipline is often just the visible result of better structure. The people who quietly pull ahead usually do something very simple. They remove friction. They make the right behaviors easier to repeat. They reduce the number of daily decisions they have to negotiate. This is not flashy work. It does not look impressive on social media, but it is incredibly effective over long periods of time. Small advantages begin stacking: a slightly better routine, a slightly more consistent habit, a slightly more stable system. Individually, these improvements look insignificant, but over time, they begin to separate outcomes noticeable way. This is the power of quiet compounding. The problem is that most people never stay in the process long enough to see it. They expect visible rewards too early. They compare their early phase to someone else's later phase, and the comparison feels discouraging. But comparison is often distorted. What you usually see is someone else's highlight moment. What you rarely see is the long, uneventful stretch that came before it. The months of repetition, the years of small adjustments, the quiet periods where nothing looked impressive. This hidden phase is where the real work happens, and it is also where most people lose patience. Patience is not just about waiting, it is about continuing to act while results are still invisible. That is much harder, because the brain constantly looks for evidence that effort is working. When that evidence is delayed, doubt starts to grow. This is the moment that quietly separates people. Not talent, not intelligence, not even motivation, but tolerance for delayed results. The people who pull ahead learn to operate without immediate feedback. They trust the structure, they trust the repetition, they trust the process long enough for compounding to begin showing up externally. Once compounding becomes visible, everything appears to accelerate. Progress looks faster, results look more dramatic. From the outside, it can seem like success happened suddenly, but it rarely did. It was building quietly the entire time. This is why sudden success is usually an illusion. What looks fast is often the visible phase of something that has been developing slowly for years. By the time most people notice, the separation is already well underway. And here is the part that matters most. The people who quietly pull ahead are not usually doing extreme things. They are doing ordinary things, consistently, for longer than most people are willing to tolerate. That is the quiet rule. Extraordinary outcomes often come from very ordinary behaviors repeated without interruption. This is not exciting advice. It does not promise overnight change. It does not rely on dramatic transformation. But it works. Because consistency, when properly structured, becomes predictable. And predictable progress is incredibly powerful over long time horizons. If you feel like progress in your own life has been slow or invisible, that does not necessarily mean it isn't happening. It may simply mean you are still in the quiet phase, the phase where habits are stabilizing, the phase where systems are taking root, the phase where momentum is still building under the surface. Most people never stay long enough to see what happens next, but the ones who do quietly pull ahead.